Hello guys, and welcome back to End All Wars with our Eastern Entente playthrough. We are moving along into another turn, and of course, as has been the usual lately, another battle for Rawa Ruska. And now, of course, they've been bringing more and more troops in, and they now have a estimated power of 540 compared to our 981. One thing I have to say is I can't wait till I get to one of the other sides that has better commanders so I can see what the opponent's doing, because I'm always very afraid of going with a full-out plan like Infantry Assault. But then I remember that my plans usually don't work anyway because my commanders are so bad. So I'm going to go with Infantry Assault. Why? Well, because the game is really doing everything in its power to emphasize the fact that we have a pretty good numeric advantage, especially with infantry, but our firepower, our artillery, does not match theirs. So we might as well exploit the one strength we have as much as we have and start fighting a little bit more like Americans and a little less like cautious European cowards, am I right? This could just blow up in our faces, but it's okay, right? Let's go ahead and go to battle. And oh my god, it actually worked really well, and we never got past the first round of combat. We didn't even get to the point of the infantry assault. We just got to a strong center deployment, and they had a prepare to withdraw deployment. So despite the fact that they started this engagement, they were trying to run away. It was raining, it was clear at the same time. That's interesting. But we had near equal forces. They have moved They have moved so many forces in and around Rawa Ruska to fight for it that they have now gone from having like 130,000 more recently to up to 160,500 units to our 170,000, which has been remaining kind of stagnant as we've held on to this position over time. We had a little under 9,000 cavalry to their 6,000. We had a little under 500 guns, so there's 648. Now, we lost everything about this except infantry, kind of. So we lost the same amount of artillery as them, but seeing as we had less, that's kind of a loss. We lost more cavalry than them, 240 or 50 more. And seeing as we had more, it's not as bad, but this ratio is not good. But the big amounts of anything right now is in the infantry. We lost 1,127 infantry while having 10,000 more than them. They lost 12,761. And what makes this so amazing, guys, is the fact that the Austrians have upgraded. If we take a peek up here, I can make my way over here. But they have upgraded their infantry and their artillery. They have upgraded everything. These are all upgraded units. So the fact that we got results this good is astounding. And I don't know what to say because this is normal difficulty and our commanders suck. Except for the fact that we were entrenched, I don't really know what would get a result like that, but I can say I'm happy. I'm happy from that result. We have more... What the fuck? How did Austrians get all the way up there? They must have redeployed them. There's a redeploy function that I haven't really been using, but God, I feel like the Germans and Austrians just keep increasing in number. No matter how much time goes by, no matter how good our combined KDR is with the Western Entente, I feel like they just keep growing and more. What's likely happening is just, Germans are redeploying off the Western front to the Eastern, which will hopefully help the Western Entente, but oh my God, I feel overwhelmed at times. Looking at how many enemies are in front of me. Look at this fucking stack. Did you see that? Giant fucking... Right over here. Giant fucking stack of Austrians just right in front of where I want to push into. And we're stuck over here at Rawa Ruska constantly defending ourselves against an equivalent force. The Serbians over here being Serbians, as they always are. Just all these German units moving through Austria. Austrian units appearing in Germany. I'm fighting the full wrath of their fucking alliance right now. I do not have the troops to deal with it. Luckily, I do have this army down in eastern Austria that's about to be freed from the weather to be able to go on some kind of an offensive here. Any damage we can do, any at all, anything we can take would be so insanely valuable. I'm so tempted to just rush across to Lemberg because it almost feels like that's what the game is goading me to do, but We won't be able to do that. So we had a little bit of an engagement here in Austria. Or Serbia, I should say. How I moved up a unit over here to try to reclaim control of it. Well, looks like they had an idea to march some troops through here at the same time. Which is great. I do believe, yes, the units from over here in Zvornik did in fact assist us just as I hoped they would. Yeah. We arrived and we were on the offensive and there was a... Remember, all these units are upgraded and ours aren't. So that's a big difference in quality here. But we won this engagement, it's safe to say. We had 100,000, almost 101,000 infantry. Wow, I didn't realize how much numbers the Serbians really had. 2,304 cavalry, that's where they really lack, huh? 204 artillery. The enemy only had 36 artillery, only 292 cavalry, and no losses in those. But only in infantry, we lost 2,050 infantry. They had 12,500 in total, and they lost almost 7,000, more than half of the troops. All it was a single division, but any positive KDR that we can grab out of this, right? I'm sure will help us in the long run. War of attrition, right? They can't possibly keep up with both the Eastern and the Western Entente. They couldn't even beat the Western Entente in the long run in real life, even after defeating the Eastern Entente. So if I can stay in the war, then hopefully, you know? But it's not going to be easy. Oh, God. Another gigantic battle at Loznica again in Serbia. It's looking like our push into Loznica is about to get turned around because they really decided to march an entire army down south into Loznica the moment I decided to go claim it. We wiped out an entire infantry division, so that's good. That's good to see right off the bat. This one, far more costly here. We have barely seen any losses on the Serbian front, so it's really interesting to start to see losses on the Serbian front. But here we have them. We've lost 6 artillery to their 36 in losses, which kind of brings us down to similar amounts. They had 240, we had 204. We lost 32 cavalry with still 2,304 beforehand. They only had 1,380. They lost 195. But again, the infantry, man. The fucking infantry. And somehow, while using inferior infantry, although in this instance, I believe we had a better commander. Well, no, we had actually a worse commander. But we lost 17,271 of our infantry out of our 98,824. They had less with 90,612, but they lost 40,487. That is an absolutely crippling loss. And do take into account, this is our inferior Serbian force down here. This is an inferior force. Most of my Serbians are over in Belgrade. Even if I lost all these forces, I would still have a formidable Serbian fighting force. But I do believe our corps that pushed into Loznica is probably going to get turned back because it's not looking very healthy right now. We can see absolutely so many Germans coming into Austria. The coalition of our enemies is definitely showing itself, with the AI not really discriminating where it puts what troops. The initial war plans are long gone, and the front lines are filled with a strangely unified coalition of enemy forces, and it's going to be a bitch to deal with, because with how many Germans are here, you know a lot of these have been pulled off the Western Front, which I can only hope makes the Western Front easier for our friends to deal with. But, God, the fact that we have to deal with it, we might see less personal progress, and we might have to rely on our AI to hopefully take advantage of the situation. So, once again, I'm wrong about the snow. We're in late March, and the snow has only moved. It's not gone. In certain areas, it's looking a lot better. But it's still here. It's certainly still here. Over where we had a big kind of movement going on, actually, we find that our units are now in harsh weather, bad terrain. Luckily, they're still in range of the main army, which has safely arrived in Kielce. Now, I guess I'm really lucky that I went ahead and did this move when I did, because now we can claim the rest of the area while sitting in a defensive posture. Oh. A militia, the militia I wanted to keep at Arzen apparently followed me over here. That's not really what I intended. But, oh well. I will need a militia for down here eventually, so I mean, I could technically leave this guy here. Yeah, I think, you know what, I'll just leave you here. I'll put you into the city. We own the city, right? Yeah, I'll put you into the city, put you on the defensive, and you're going to sit here and you're going to protect here, and I'll get another militia for Arzen. Otherwise, we will slowly start to gain control of Konski, hopefully completely within one turn of sitting there, and Ostrowiec, I don't know. But taking control of these two little countrysides, this one has a road in it, so it's a little more important, while the main force here will sit and recover and claim control of this area of Kielce, which, as it stands, is still in a threatening scenario, because so long as the enemies have military control at all in this region, they can hop on the railway and just kind of push themselves over here in an instant if they want to. One day, probably. So we need to get control of this ASAP, hopefully in the next turn, right? But this might be a multi-turn situation that I have going on here. Looking up north, Poland didn't actually see a battle. Hindenburg chose to just sit here in the middle of winter and do nothing. He seems to be getting reinforcements from the north, or he's sending troops to the north. Either way, a turn of Hindenburg sitting here not doing anything is certainly good for us. Looking even further north, we can see there are some Germans in Lotsen, unsurprising. And, our movement into Wallau has not actually completed, and the total supplies of our units are looking a little problematic, but like not really. Problem is, the harsh winter has appeared in this area again. Although, look, it's gone from this area. All the units that were up here have retreated south into Wallau, so we are clear to now conquer this stuff. Hell, even move into Memel. They have barely defended it, by the looks of it. And a new problem emerges in Eastern Prussia, given the resuming harsh weather. I've been looking all over the map to try to find anything interesting happening, and to be honest, there's not a whole lot happening. Like, over in Asia and the Pacific, Japan is still besieging this singular fort that Germany has in China. I was fucking up the words there for a second. Nothing interesting happening in Africa, but one thing I did realize I forgot about was that Portugal actually has colonies in Africa still, so Portugal joining actually made a little more difference than I thought it would. Whereas, one thing I noticed is that since Belgium isn't in the war, like they would historically be, Africa's kind of split in half. The Allies can't just go through it, you know, as they would be able to. Not that they necessarily would be without Italy joining. Italy joining, that would make a big difference as well. And we know they're going to join. We know they're going to join earlier than was historical. When did they historically join? So Italy joined May 23rd, 1915. March, April, May. Okay, so I guess we actually are on a bit of a historical time track then. Which is funny, because a lot of ahistorical things had to happen to get it this way. Italy is at 89%. The Central Powers is working to keep them off of our side, which is unfortunate. Oh, poor France, 24% rebels. At least Austria is doing similarly bad, but Austria is not as important as France. No offense. Romania is still kind of in the middle, so that's good. Bulgaria, is only 5% away. That really sped along, it feels like. It's only 5% of the way from joining them. Greece is the one that we were really hoping for. Not Italy, that's right. Italy was always a little ways away. But Greece, that's the one we're really hoping for. They're 7% away, so they're still about a 2-day separation. Well, they're gaining 2 points a turn, so right now this looks like 3 turns till it hits 100, so a 4th turn till it joins, assuming a 2% gain every single turn towards the leaning power. This one is 7% away, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 turns until 100, and then a 5th turn. So by the looks of it, if things go without a hitch on both sides, Bulgaria will join the war in the 4th turn from now on the side of the Central Powers, and Greece will join one of the Ententes in 5 turns, so exactly 1 turn after Bulgaria. So that means, that's pretty important. That means that the Bulgarian front will open, which is not good news for Serbia, but they'll only have 1 turn to really do anything before Greece joins. And if we get control of Greece, that will be great, because I can immediately put Greece to work on pushing into Bulgaria. Serbia won't really have that ability. Greece will also kind of have to contend with the Ottomans, but at least not initially, so we will be able to push into Bulgaria without issue. Maybe more northernly, to kind of keep them away from Serbia instead of westernly, maybe play defensive. Or if the Western Entente takes control of them, which I feel like is more likely, can only cross our fingers and hope that they do something good. Whether it's, I don't know, just moving the Greeks in general and using. Thankfully, our infantry has hit level 2, as well as our chemical warfare research and our aviation research. Meaning now we can actually upgrade our planes. The only thing that did not hit level 2 when I wanted it to was artillery. So that will take another turn. But I've been saving up money. I can currently do 2 of these upgrades, if you can even do 2 at a time. Still no decisions. So let's fund infantry research. And let's fund... I've decided to go with aviation research for now, if it even lets me do 2 of these at once. For no particular reason, it's just... the order doesn't really matter. They'll gain the same amount, except for artillery, which right now kind of needs to wait till it gets upgraded. But I've decided to go with aviation for now. Next turn, I'll go with artillery if it gets level 2, or chemical warfare. Otherwise, we earn enough money that we can do exactly 1 research every turn anyway. There's a couple things that happened, but let me just take a look at the Western Front first. This exciting place that I can't exactly see what's happening. Rail lines are still a cut mess over here. Lots of regions pillaged, so there must be Germans or Austrians just running around, likely Germans, running around like crazy. Switzerland looking still mainly untouched. The border between Germany and France still looking like a hellhole. The main forts still being held on to by France, except down in the south where they've fallen. Strange little situation over here. Some French troops or someone maybe some Swiss got into Freiburg, took some of the countryside, and then cut the fucking rail line. That's interesting. Saint Mihiel is under the control of France, but the entirety, essentially, of the surrounding area is under control of the Germans, so I'm not quite sure how that worked. But a couple things interesting that happened is you'll see we're still at 98 national morale, which is actually the same exact amount we had last turn. That's because one of our battles actually gave us 1 national morale. And it's this one where we slaughtered a large amount of enemies, which is funny. It's so funny that this gave me a national morale, because if we lost a battle with even losses, we would lose a national morale. This game's not very nice to the player, I've noticed. But we gained a national morale, which would hopefully reflect pretty well and have this at, 89. That's just what I was expecting. Their national morale has gone down their usual 1 that it goes down every turn, but also an extra 1 because of the battle. And there's no way to really generate national morale currently without events, and there's not a lot of events doable right now. So this is nice, the fact that we're continuing to lower their national morale, because this also affects their unit morale in battle, and the bigger of a gap we can put in between our morale and their morale, the better our forces will perform in combat. Victory points, we're just slaughtering them as a whole. In terms of actual combat value ratings, it's not looking very good on land. In terms of navy, it's looking great. Combined losses of the Entente right now is almost 900,000, but not quite. And did I say 900? 90,000. No, wait, no, I meant 900,000. The Central Powers, however, have lost over 1 million. 1,028,000. That is mind-boggling if you think about it. It hasn't even been a year. And there's been almost 2 million total losses, or about 2 million total losses. That's insane. Another thing I'm going to do during this, since I still have money left over and I'm gaining a good amount of money, I'm just going to recruit the final Serbian cavalry division they can even recruit, because it's like the one thing that can recruit right now other than a supply train. And they need all the forces they can get. You see they're running out. Only 2 more mountain brigades and then 8 infantry. So they're definitely starting to run lower and lower, but I can definitely make them more of a fighting force. And thank God I have, because They're putting up a great fight. We may share the same conscript pool, we may share the same resources, but their cities, their villages, they contribute to my resources as well. And I can't rely entirely on the Russians. Of course, that's essentially what the Eastern Entente is. It's Russia. It's Tsarist Russia. So I kind of have to. Serbia may be a small player in it, but the more valuable of a player that Serbia ends up being, the more heat they take off of Russia. And that can only be a good thing. Again, if we get Greece too, right? And it expands even further, then the Balkans will be a much better location for us. If we can somehow take Bulgaria, but the problem is, taking Bulgaria would include fighting the Ottomans, because the Ottomans aren't just going to sit around and let Bulgaria right next to Constantinople fall. Whether or not, you know, the Brits and maybe the French, I forget exactly who this is, probably one's Brit and one French, but they're over here, but they're not going to be enough of a distraction. This is going to fail more than likely, as I believe it did historically. And we're going to be on our own, unless Greece joins the Western Entente, and then they're just going to run around like fucking headless chickens. Eventually, I do think we will need to subjugate the Balkans in order to win, truly. Like, the Balkans are going to need to be subjugated. Historically, I believe the Balkans just fell to the Central Powers, and we're going to need to do the opposite there. We have Serbia, we have Montenegro, we're going to need all of this. Whether we own it or the Western Entente, we're going to need all of this. Romania is going to join the enemies, I'm pretty sure. Hopefully they don't, but I'm pretty sure. And then Russia, we're going to need to conquer this with Russia. Bulgaria, hopefully Greece can do it, right? Because Serbia is just holding off massive hordes of Austrians and doing damn good damage. And I fear moving a sizable force to try to confront the Bulgarians, other than this minuscule defensive force, may be problematic. Of course, as I produce more units, may not necessarily turn out to be a bad thing, because I may be able to deploy more army corps over here, but only really to play a defensive role, unless the Bulgarians are somehow distracted from the Serbian border. One thing I'm going to do off map that I probably should have done like 2 turns ago, but 2 turns isn't that big of a deal in a 100+ turn game. I'm going to deploy the decision concessions on specifically Russia, because Russia's at 5% rebel alignment, and this will move them 3% back towards my alignment. You can only play this once every 12 turns, which is why I should have deployed it earlier, but again, won't make the biggest difference. Serbia is only at 2% because they were kind of helped out by a decision, so I'm not going to deploy it on them yet. And that will help move them back towards Entente alignment. As you can see, the Western Entente has been doing this like non-stop, as well as printing money. Well, so is Central Powers, actually. I wanted to avoid doing these if possible, because I didn't know how much I would need them. And I don't necessarily need it, but the cost is only 2 engagement points and 50 victory points. We are destroying the Central Powers in victory points if you combine mine with the Western Entente and our gains in general. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy that so that we have the same amount as Serbia, but then next turn I'll probably deploy it in Serbia to get them back down to 100% alignment. Granting concessions cannot keep up with the amount of rebel growth. So there's also like changing governments, which costs national morale a lot of victory points. All we need to do is stay ahead of the enemies, right? We don't need to be fucking perfect here. We just need to stay ahead of the enemies. Which is why, to min-max, I should have done this earlier, but really, I'm still learning the game, so I don't think a 2-turn difference is going to really be the end of the world. Besides, I think there might be things to actually boost it in the decisions. For example, this. No, this is national morale. But as a reminder, the reason why, as Russia, we want to keep this alignment as low as possible is because when it hits 70%, there's a huge chance that every turn the Russian Revolution will happen. And we want to avoid that. I don't know what this fucking is, by the way, but it's been happening this whole turn all over the map. This is going to be another turn where we're kind of pushing our railway capacity because I'm moving a whole lot of units that just got built. A lot of things are happening, but at the same time, in some areas, a lot of things just aren't happening. So let's look where things are happening that are new. So this army that's been sitting here, mainly doing nothing, is going back to Stanislav, which was just kind of stepped over because there was nothing defending it because of the winter. It's a small force here. we're just going to take the rails, and I got to make sure I have everybody here that's going on rail movement. Otherwise, that'll be a huge mistake. But they're going to arrive in literally 2 days, and then they're going to either kill everyone there or force them to run away. Either way, we're going to recapture this, and I'm sending a militia unit down, which is going to occupy the city to chase off small invasions like this, and then free up these guys for other things now that the winter at least is giving them a turn of breathing room down here. I've already discussed what's happening over here. We're going to continue to hold Rawaruska. We're going to hold our position over towards Dubno because there's a lot of Austrians over here. I don't know if it's combined with Germans, but the sheer amount of Austrians over here is absolutely insane. They outpower us for sure. We have some entrenchment here in these fields at the very least, so I'm just going to stare at them for the time being and not give them a chance to rush up on Dubno and not give them a chance to intercept us outside of entrenchments. Sadly, I've already checked, but I cannot gas warfare bombard them. I don't really know what you need to be able to gas warfare bombard someone, but there's no good targets for gas warfare. This is the closest thing to a good target, but it's not anything we can really exploit. Because the biggest benefit of using gas warfare is the fact that you are going to reduce their health. And seeing as you have to sacrifice national morale and other things, but namely a national morale point just to do it, first use being super effective or not, there's no point for me to use it on this guy because I don't plan on attacking anytime soon. It won't weaken him. And the same goes like if we zoom out anywhere else. There's just nowhere worth doing this. Even over here, there's almost no troops here, so it really wouldn't matter. There's troops nearby, but not in a good position. Even here, the amount of Turkish forces here are minimal. Sure, they're here, but they're also entrenched in the fucking hills, and I don't plan on attacking them. Whereas this would make it completely viable of an option to do so, I still don't plan on doing. One thing I am going to do, though, is I am going to move the other 2 corps that have been sitting in defensive positions forward south to meet up with the actual army that they are a part of, in case I change my mind and do decide to make some sort of crazy offensive like that. I mean, it's kind of poking the beast, right? Because we're holding our own really fine here, but their capital is right here, and it's a real juicy target. And now that I have all my troops in this area, and now that I've unlocked gas, it's certainly tempting. And at the very least, we don't need to defend here, really, because if they marched through the mountains, they wouldn't have enough cohesion to take this location before we could get more troops there with our railroads. And over here, simultaneously, they'd have to march quite a ways to get there. And they either have to come through the mountains, or they have to come up these long stretches of roads and mountains, which I just don't see them doing because the only easy way to avoid my sight is to go through their own mountains, and the AI usually doesn't work like that. Even if they did, it's right next to this, and we could reinforce it in no time. I'm going to continue to just kind of hold my position in Poland. There are so many German units moving around through Poland that I'm just going to sit put in Western Poland. So long as von Hindenburg is here, I see a reason to sit put, at least for now. Even if I wanted to go anywhere from Western Poland, I don't really have that capability right now. Anyway, it's still covered in snow, harsh weather, and I would sacrifice my own units by trying to go on an offensive in any direction from here. So instead, we're just going to deal with the weather, stay put, hope they attack again and ruin their own forces, and then when the snow clears, maybe then we'll go on an offensive. Over in Eastern Prussia, despite the snow having reappeared, I'm not going to cancel my attack here. We've done almost all the required movement to get to Wehlau already. And our cohesion is strong, our health is strong, our supplies could be a little bit better. But at this point, these guys, led by Otto here, this army corps has not had time to entrench. Harsh weather or not, they have not had time to entrench. So I'm not too worried about them. They may have level 1 entrenchments. I doubt they'll have level 2. And we're going to arrive with an overwhelming force. Compare our total numbers here to theirs. We should be able to storm their positions, get them to run away pretty easily. So it's less of a cutting off tactic now, but now that they've retreated, you know, they'll either continue to retreat, which they could do in no time flat. They could get out of here before our attack even arrives, but as things stand, I'm planning on proceeding with the attack, despite the weather, crossing my fingers, and hoping for the best. In the meantime, my HQ's army over here is going to split into 2 corps going over to Rutzau, 2 corps going over to Dorbiani, and we are going to capture these 2 locations and kind of reform our rail line over here. Once they are captured, I will regroup and send everyone down to Memel and start sieging it in order to capture it. So I guess it's still a little cutting off thing, but all we're really cutting off is the garrisons over here. And that's pretty much my war plan as things stand. But we have a nice full episode clocked in here. Another turn gone by. These turns are getting longer. The more and more stuff happens, the more I have to do. But with the next turn, you know, we'll hit end turn, and hopefully these attacks go well. Hopefully this situation goes well. Hopefully we don't get gas. Hopefully nobody uses any gas warfare of any kind, because that would just be nice, because I honestly like to use the first use for myself if possible. However, the problem with using gas is that, you know, you have to make it worth it, because you're sacrificing a national morale point. And if you maintain high national morale but just let your enemy lose morale, that's more beneficial to you than any benefit using gas warfare could bring you in the entire game. That being said, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.